I want to thank everyone for coming today. I want to thank the press for being here. This is such an important issue across the city of Pittsburgh and actually across the region and across the country, as you can tell by a lot of the articles in today's paper and in the past. I think that Pittsburgh has always been on the forefront of a lot of things, and I think education is going to be one of those things you see coming out of this new administration, making it such a priority. And the fact that this task force has come together and done a ton of work, and I want to thank the task force members, and I'm going to tell them to come up, step up and introduce themselves so you know who folks are. And this is not even the total task force. These are just some of the folks that could join us today. But I'm going to tell them to come forward, introduce themselves, because they've done a tremendous amount of work. We'll start with Patrick Dowd.
Patrick Dowd, Allies for Children.
Stephen O'Brien, Pittsburgh Public Schools student.
Derek Long, Pittsburgh Public Schools parent and teacher at Pittsburgh Perry.
Linda Lane, Superintendent, Pittsburgh Public Schools.
Good morning, Carrie Harris, Executive Director of A+ Schools.
Good morning, Terry Kennedy, Pittsburgh Public Schools School Board.
Hello, everyone. My name is Natalia Rudiak. I am City Councilor for Pittsburgh District 4 and a very proud graduate of the Pittsburgh Public Schools.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Brian Brown. I'm a community organizer within the Hill District.
Good morning, everyone. Harold Grant from the Pittsburgh Federation of Teachers, standing in for Nina Esposito-Viscaitis, our president.
Okay. And of course, we have the mayor. And we're going to get to the mayor, and we're going to get to the mayor. We're going to get to the mayor and Dr. Lane, and we're going to get to the mayor, Dr. Lane, and here we're going to hear from some of the task force members again at the end of this news conference. But I just want to talk a little bit about that. Today, we're going to release the report that we have worked through several meetings on, and it was such a great collaboration that we had thought after we started meeting that there was a lot of areas that overlapped, a lot of areas of interest that we needed to continue to address, and a lot of ways that our collaboration not only will help the students of the city of Pittsburgh, but will send a strong message that we are united, a united group of folks that are willing to work for the betterment of our students across the city of Pittsburgh, no matter where you attend school. So we talked a little bit about in the future about including additional, possibly charter school folks, possibly private school folks, and I think what we realize is these are all our students, no matter where they attend schools. These are all our children. These are people that we care about, and this is our future. And if we don't take a stand at this point and we continue down the path of ignoring things and saying that this is not our responsibility, this is not your responsibility, and we don't collaborate on these issues that are so important, we're going to continue down the downward spiral, and we're not going to attract. If you look at some residents to the city of Pittsburgh, we're not going to retain residents in the city of Pittsburgh. If you look at the city of Pittsburgh, where we lost some residency over the past several years. We've lost, I think the last time I looked, it was around 14,000 families with school-age children. And if you don't think that that has some impact to the city of Pittsburgh and that we should not be involved in at the table, then you really don't get the greater picture, and you really don't understand the value in investing in our children. And I think that at this point, after we came together, we realized that there's a lot of value, there's a lot of interest, and there's a lot of priority with our children. And so I want to thank the task force, but I mostly want to thank Mayor Peduto, because he's gotten a lot of heat over this, and I think it's easy to take political shots, it's easy to make comments, it's easy to do things. It's not easy to roll up your sleeves and get busy. It's not easy to contribute. It's not easy to be a positive force to make sure that you're addressing issues and that you're working through concerns. So I want to thank him for his commitment through this, even through the bumpy times. I think that at the end we're going to have something extremely successful. I think at the end there will be a lot of folks that want to be on board with this. I think as we can see now, just from some of our work we've been doing over the past few meetings, we are getting a tremendous amount of calls from folks that want to be involved in this. They see the value in working together. They see the value in collaboration. And so with that said, I want to thank the mayor for his commitment and staying steadfast on this and putting the youth of the city of Pittsburgh first before anyone else's politics or any political agendas. So thank you, Mayor. Mayor Peduto.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And so I started to think as you were speaking about what brought us here. And I guess the process really began in earnest around September of 2013. There were some articles that had come out that a few of the schools would be closing, that we would be seeing school closures happening as early as 2014. And council had taken some actions to try and compel the school district and the school board to stop any of the school closings that may happen. And at that point, there was friction. There wasn't communication. It was literally friction coming from two different sides about what the role of city government should be, or whether city government should just step away from the issue completely. And from that came one of the first communications, led by Councilwoman Smith, of trying to reach out between City Council and the Pittsburgh Public Schools, and most importantly, the school board itself. And from that, the legislation that was being proposed was pulled, and instead a task force idea of bringing everyone together to do something that we haven't done for over a decade, something that's absolutely critical to education: talk. To be able to have people from different sides and different viewpoints sit down and talk. And that's what the Education's Task Force was mandated with. It was almost 1 year ago today. It was back on February 21st, 2014, that the people behind me and the other members of this task force were named. And in little under 1 year, they've been able not just to put together a series of recommendations and steps that are the necessary building blocks of having a united front on what public education means in the city of Pittsburgh, but they've been able to diffuse where we were 1 year ago. And let me remind you of where we were 1 year ago. 1 year ago today, we were fighting about school closings. We were fighting about teacher evaluation. We were fighting over a rising, crippling school deficit. And we were fighting over a lack of communication. Today, and with this report, in less than 1 year, we've reached agreement to work together on making our children and our neighborhoods safer through collaborative efforts. We're working together to create out-of-school time opportunity in a collaborative way between the schools and the city and our nonprofit partners. We're working together to develop a concept called community schools that will support not just the kids, but their families in the neighborhoods that need it the most. We're working together to lobby for school funding reform in partnership not only with our union, but with our corporate community and, again, our nonprofits. And we're working together to tell the positive story of Pittsburgh Public Schools and to create an ongoing communication between the school and the city for the benefit of our children. In less than 1 year, this task force has done so much more than just create an agenda to move forward. It has also healed the wounds of a previous decade. Councilwoman Smith, thank you for having the leadership and the vision to understand that a great journey starts with a first step. And thank you to everyone who has been a part of this task force for taking several steps in less than a year.
Thank you, Mayor Peduto. And, you know, when we brought folks together, I have to be honest, I don't think Dr. Lane was really thrilled with the legislation initially, but she came around. And I want to say she not only came around, but she has been one of the strongest advocates for her students. And if you know Dr. Lane, she's fiercely protective of her students, and she's fiercely protective of her Pittsburgh Public Schools. And she still managed to bring us all together and to work together, and has really risen above what I've seen a lot of superintendents do in the past. She put her ego aside, she put her power aside, and made sure that we were working together for the betterment of the students. I think that people don't understand the value of putting aside everything. It's easy to exploit our children for politics. It's easy to exploit our children for jobs. It's easy to exploit our children in many ways. It's not easy to put all your egos aside. And I'm so thankful to Dr. Lane and to the mayor and to the school board and to the task force members, for everyone, for putting their egos aside and putting the children first to stop the endless exploitation of our children. And so I just want to thank Dr. Lane, and I want to introduce her, and she's going to make some remarks, but I want to thank her very much for her efforts coming forward, because she was very steadily making sure that we focused on children in the city of Pittsburgh. And she was worried about all children. And so I just want to say that it was really great to work with her. She's going to continue to be a force in this commission as we move forward. And so I'll turn it over to Dr. Lane.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Cale Smith. I appreciate that introduction. The role that I saw as we began this process was about working together, and I think many of you in this room are aware of the fact that we issued a plan about a year or so ago, Whole Child, Whole Community. One of the things we talked about needing for our children in our city is a collective impact model. And so when this task force was formed, it was actually one of our first opportunities to think about what would it look like if we could work together on some things that need our attention. Two things in the report that I am most pleased about. One is the safety issue. I talked to the task force as well as the Department of Public Safety and had frankly wonderful cooperation from the Bureau of Police around safety in our neighborhoods, because we have some neighborhoods that make it difficult for kids to concentrate on their academics. And so being able to work together to make that a stronger model for kids, I think, is extremely important. Another one is telling our good stories. We know that I've learned over time there are plenty of people willing to tell your bad story for you. You don't necessarily need to do that. That it is our job to tell the good story. And so there are so many of them out there. And to have the city working with us to tell the good stories of things kids are doing every day. Even now, as we stand here, teachers and kids would be working today if it weren't for the fact that we're not, I think I'm trying to say Florida, but that wouldn't even work because it's too cold there too. But today they would be working to do some great things. And so any of you that doubt that, visit a school. Visit a school. I don't care what people have said about it. I don't care what they think is going on. Please go in and see for yourselves, because you will be, I think, in most cases, very pleased with the things you see going on in our classrooms and the work our teachers are doing. So I believe in working together with people. I don't have to agree with people to work with them. I don't have to agree with them to work with them. And I do believe that as a city, it is important for city government and the district to work collaboratively to solve some of our most pressing problems. And so that's been the work of the task force. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to say I really value what you said about going to visit the school, Dr. Lane, because when I have 3 children, when my children left private school to go to Pittsburgh Public Schools, my son had contacted me and asked me to send him to Langley. And I said, over my dead body. Well, I'm still here today, and my son graduated from Langley. I just want to say it was amazing when I actually went in and saw what they were actually doing inside that school. So go see for yourself. I want to introduce Councilwoman Rudiak, who was a strong advocate on this and a strong force on this task force, and had been very helpful. And so I want to introduce her for a few comments, and then shortly after we hear from a couple members, we're going to turn over to Mayor Peduto and Tim McNulty to answer your questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman Cale Smith. Thank you, Superintendent Lane and the Mayor. I am very happy to be here to talk more about this partnership between the city and the Pittsburgh Public Schools and stakeholders across the city. As I said earlier, I am a very proud graduate of the Pittsburgh Public Schools, having gone to Concord Elementary School and Sterrett Classical Academy and Carrick High School. And I know that my education has offered me more than anything that we can quantify with complex statistics or progress reports, but you know, I had supportive teachers, I had exposure to diversity in different cultures, all within the context of our greater urban center. And really, there was no way to separate the school experience that I had with the great amenities and interests of the city. And that made my experience as a Pittsburgh Public Schools student all the richer. And for the first time in a long time, we stand here today with a report and a committee of people who want to finally recognize that and weave the resources of the school and the city together, because we know that if we work together, the student experience and the quality of education will be greater than the sum of the parts. As you look through the report, you'll see there's 5 different sections that we focused on. First, public safety, out-of-school programming, connections between school and their communities in the form of community schools and coordinating resources through that. Marketing, of course, we have this wonderful partnership with the city and school district right now, the Pittsburgh Promise, and we are all committed to working harder to actively recruit families and students to the district. I do have to say, I was actually I've been door knocking a lot when I've been running for office, and I literally met families who lived in places like Beachview and Brookline who had moved from places like Mount Lebanon to take advantage of the Pittsburgh Promise. So I have seen with my own eyes that this is working, but we need to do more. We need to harness the power of alumni to connect our schools and communities together. As Superintendent Lane said, we have so many good stories to tell. And as a city councilor, I've always worked to bring out those stories and visit schools and do proclamations. I was just at Brashear, and I'm actually the director of the statewide Young Elected Officials Network, so I'm planning to go into the social studies classes at Brashear and talk a little bit about what it's like to be an elected official, hopefully in the next few weeks. So I'm constantly doing this. We need to make sure that all of our elected officials are connected to these opportunities, and we need to all be equal partners in that fight for better education and better school funding. So as much as this, we can take a sigh of relief that this report is done. In many ways, this is just the beginning of our work. There's so much work to be done to really reach the goals that are outlined in this report, but we look forward to acting on them and not just letting them sit on the shelf. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Rudiak. And I'm going to introduce School Board Member, School Board Director Terry Kennedy, who has, I don't think she's missed one meeting in terms of this Education Task Force. And I also want to say that we were to meet at Westwood School in Westwood, and due to the school cancellation, that we were unable to meet there today. But we want to thank all the staff and folks there who were preparing for this news conference there. We'll make it up and we'll have a meeting there or something. Terry Kennedy.
Thank you. 25 years ago, my husband and I were newlyweds, and we were just the type of families that we now are looking to attract. I was working in the suburbs. It would have been easy to buy a house in the suburbs when we decided to stop renting and buy a house. Instead, we said, well, wait a minute, the only thing we do in the suburbs is work. Everything we do is in the city. So what did we end up doing? We only looked for houses in the city, and we bought in 1990. We didn't have children yet. We didn't know what our future children's interests or needs were going to be, but we bought into the city in 1990 knowing our future children would attend the Pittsburgh Public Schools. And I'm proud to say my children have through their whole life. And in fact, my oldest, who turns 21 next week, will actually graduate this year, not because he's a slow learner, but because he has a special education, and due to the laws, you can stay in the district and be educated through the end of the school year during which you turn 21. So he'll actually graduate this June, but he started an early intervention in the district. So I've been in the district for a long time based on him. And my daughter is a graduate, and she's a sophomore in college majoring in education, and she wants to come back to the city and teach. In fact, both my children attended Minadeo, and the teachers there were so happy to hear what my daughter is majoring in, they wanted to come here from Wilkes-Barre, where she's in college, to go do her student teaching. If it wasn't for the distance factor, she might have considered it. But what I'm telling you is, as you're looking to relocate, where you're looking to buy a house, don't just say, oh, we can't send them to live in the city. You have to look, take a tour, meet the principals, meet the other parents, to walk around. And also, even if you do not have children, realize an investment in our community is an investment in all of our futures. Because without our children, and we don't need schools, and without our schools, we don't have a city. So we really want everybody. And that's one of the reasons this task force was so important, because there is that tie-in. We can't just be in separate silos. You know, Councilman O'Connor and I have a lot of the same territory for our voting district. But guess what? We talk. We know what's going on with each other, because it is important if we're going to meet the needs of the constituents. Yes, we all vote for the whole city, whether you're on city council or on school board, but what's going on in our own neighborhoods are where we can be most impactful of, say, yeah, we know this is coming up, and we know this incident's going to be affecting these students. So, you know, it's very nice, and I'm sure a lot of my colleagues, I know Teresa Cale-Smith talks a lot to her school board members.
I talk a lot, period.
and I know Councilwoman Rudiak is the same. We're all like that, because why? That's how we work better together. It's not just through this formal task force. It's the informal meetings and showing up the same community meetings, because we all have vested interests. So just because the task force report is out and the business of this past year is done, there's a lot going forward, and I'm sure you're going to hear more of that coming up. But even outside the formal committee, there's a lot going on behind the scenes. So thank you, and just pack the Pete on Saturday for City League basketball championships.
Thank you. Thank you, Cherry. And if the press hasn't had enough about our Families Day, we have photo albums we'd like to share with you in the back. I'm going to turn it over to Mayor Peduto and Tim McNulty for questions regarding the task force and the work and the report. No, no one else wanted to speak.
Any questions? The mayor's here to talk about the vision of the report. Patrick Dowd, Allies for Children, can talk some of the specifics if you have specific questions. Shoot.
What are the top 3 recommendations? I mean, there's a lot in here. What are the top 3 things that...
So I think if you were to look at that report, the main recommendation is that the city and the school district collaborate over the course of basically the future. And the task force has identified 5 core areas for that form of collaboration. You heard the mayor articulate that at the beginning in his comments. Public safety, as Dr. Lane said, is the highest priority. And when we think about public safety, we can talk about safety areas around schools. We can talk about safe routes to school and things of that sort. So you can look in there and see about that. The mayor also talked about out-of-school time, and the city has an important role to play in collaboration with the school district on that front. I didn't read it in advance, but we also we talked about communications, marketing of the excellence of education here in the city. We talked about community and schools and the importance of building a model based on data and needs, and school funding. We talked about making sure that we were advocating as a community. Some of us are interested in fair funding for Pennsylvania, but we're all interested in fair funding for Pittsburgh, obviously.
What are some of the first things that parents or students will see as this comes into place, or the things that we'll see?
On the recommendations, if you could.
Yeah, sure. So I would say that some of the things you're already seeing, the city is taking a role in partnership with APOST and other organizations related to out-of-school time. So you're starting to see the city move into that space, but APOST and others and the task force have recommended that the city really think about systematic efforts that they could use and deploy to increase access. So you might start to see areas of collaboration there. But additionally, I think around the safety, there's already been a tremendous amount of conversation on that front, and I would expect over the course of the year you'll see opportunities to improve safety in communities for kids in schools.
Just to follow up on it just for a second, the superintendent, myself, well, the superintendent, the president of PFT, and I meet on a regular basis. And that's been from really the first month that I've been in the office. I would say that it's a healthy discussion, that there's trepidation on how far you step. Where is the responsibility of one? Where is the responsibility of the other? What this is it's a blueprint for us to be able to work on a common agenda where there is no trepidation. It's a blueprint where the school board and Pittsburgh City Council can put resources behind a common goal, and where we understand the lobbying that's needed in Harrisburg is on one single piece of paper. It isn't the school board's lobbying, it's not the City of Pittsburgh's lobbying, it's what we do to lobby for the kids in Pittsburgh. So that's where we are right now. And the 5 recommendations are a way to get us in their specifics under each of those to where we need to be over the course of the next several years. And what it does is it allows us to work together from one common agenda instead of having to pick and choose the agendas that are being presented from individuals, organizations, and others, and instead bring us together in a united front. So I think that what the councilwoman spoke about back when we were at the phase of not working together but fighting was we need to start talking. And what this does is goes much further than that. It gives us a set of 5 concrete ways that we can benefit the city and what resources will be needed to put behind it as well to get it done.
Is there some mechanism to review this so that you can look in 6 months or a year and go, yep, got that one done,
Yep.
nope, that's not.
That actually came out of this, too. Yeah.
So if you look in the report, there's a recommendation that the mayor and the superintendent report back on the working groups that, let's say, that would be put together around these recommendations. So I would expect that there'll be regular reports back to the task force as well as, more importantly, to the council, the board, and the broader public.
City Council late last year created a full-time commission on education, something we haven't had in the past. And there's been some discussion on whether or not the role of the mayor or city council should be in education when there's other needs such as public safety and public works. And I steal the phrase from a fellow mayor from the Midwest who said, any mayor or elected official who gives up on education gives up on the future of their city.
Mayor Peduto, can you point to one thing, let's say public safety, that's different now? Will the city police be patrolling particular routes?
Yeah. Well, on public safety, it not only involves the use of the Pittsburgh Police and in a partnership with Pittsburgh Public Schools. We do this for neighborhood business districts. We have officers who go in and help the business districts to understand where there may be security issues, creating phone chains and email chains in order to get word out. But we don't do the same within our school systems. And so there'll be a more collaborative way that the Pittsburgh Public Schools and the chief in particular work directly with the superintendent. There also will be analysis done of the areas around the schools, and as we look to do a complete street model over the next couple of years for downtown in Oakland, we're also going to be looking at that same type of a model around our schools. In other words, are our areas safe not just for vehicles to travel, but for people to walk, people with needs to walk, and even bicycling and other modes of transportation around it. Yep.
Just last Friday, Chief McClay came to our office, which was phenomenal, and met with our acting chief of police, and about six of us sat together with him and Commander Schubert and talked about how some of the things we wanted to change. We plan to invite Chief McClay to come to our principals meeting, talk to our principals. We talked about the zone commanders getting to know the principals in their zone, so there's just a tighter collaboration, especially trading information, because that can be one of the best safety measures we can have.
Finally, in the annual operating budget for the city, there will also be a line item for the schools within the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police budget. I'm not sure at this time.
And is that going to cover, say, these initiatives where you're trying to have officers who are like point people at those districts? Is that going to cover like the staffing on that, or is it specific? I don't know about that one.
Yeah, the discussion is still ongoing. I think that it really needs to be through what the schools need and what we will take on to be a part of our operating budget to help them to do it. So it will, there's a lot of good examples out there. There's a lot of ways technology can be utilized. We want to make sure that public safety services of the city are being provided in a cooperative way to every school.
Can you just touch briefly a little bit on the Community Schools Initiative again? The report talks about integrating services, and I'm wondering what you envision there as far as what kind of programs or whatever that you want to have the students available to that aren't right now.
Actually, do you want to say something?
Community schools models usually are based on integrating different services in schools, especially in the schools where we need it the most. It may be health services, it may be dental, it may be social services. Often it means having a way for families to kind of support the work of the school social worker to connect families to agencies within the city that they might need to be able to access. Part of it is knowing what kids need and being able to know which children are matched up with which services and how can we better ensure that kids where there's an agency out there that could be helping this family, but the family didn't know about it, and we make those connections. In community schools, often those services are actually provided within the school, and it may be on a rotating basis. I see everything from a mobile van that goes around and provides services on a regular basis to having an actual office in the school. So there are different models around the country.
Do you have a goal for when you'd like to see those kind of services in place?
Well, we're talking about the model right now. We don't have a firm timeline in place. Of course, like everything else, you'd like to provide services kids need as quickly as you can.
There is an item in the report referring to the possibility of hiring a liaison. Could you elaborate on the possibility of that?
So as the mayor said earlier, and I think Dr. Lane also said this, the idea is that this is a blueprint identifying these core areas, and you'll find that there'll be a need for working groups to start to actually delve into the mechanics and the details of each of these areas. One of the suggestions, though, this is for reporting forward and for continuing to identify future areas of collaboration, was the possibility of putting together some position, fuller, whether it's a portion of a position or not, it's unclear yet, to do liaison work and to be a more direct form of communication between the city and the school district. It's a recommendation that they consider that. It's not something that they actually they're required to do. I think the kind of communication and collaboration that you're starting to see is probably the most important thing, and the continuation of that is what's really most important.
Time for one more schools question.
I can't let that go. I mean, this guy was a school board member, a city council member, and now leads a nonprofit on children. I mean, what we need to do is take Dr. Dowd's brain and basically have that ability to understand it from all three perspectives. How do we get our schools, our city, and those on the front lines of helping children to work collaboratively on a single agenda? That's all we need to do. We need to basically have that ability to do it and to work together. And, we have the perfect example with Dr. Dowd. What we need to do is find the ability to do that, whether it is through the informal process we have or a more structured process through an individual. But all three need to be rowing together. There's enough resources out there. We don't have an infinite amount of kids. We have a finite number, and we can help them individually and collectively by doing it and understanding that all three have to be working together.